Hi everyone, my name is Tara and this is a video you should not miss. If you're in the self-help, self-actualization, spirituality or even personal development world in general, you might came across the notion of ego. And I have a huge problem with how the word ego or the ego itself is treated nowadays. Just for context, I'm a trainee lawyer, which means that in Germany I already passed the first law examination, so I'm technically 2 years away from being a lawyer. But since I got pregnant, these are plans that are a little bit on hold, and that's why I'm here talking to you, because I want to share my experiences that I've gained over the last, I would say, 7 years in the spirituality realm, in the spirituality world. And I think that my perspective is kind of unique because I really deep dived all those esoteric topics while being a very logical law person, if you get what I mean. So when we think of the ego, most people in the spiritual realm want to overcome it. They see triggers as the bad parts of the ego that want you to stay in the old, to drag you down. And there's also this that everything the ego tells you is bad and not enlightened, and we need to somehow kill our ego. That's especially in the psychedelic realm where people, and I mean, I was one of those people, want to take substances, for example 5-MeO-DMT, to basically kill the ego, to finally be able to experience the oneness, or how I liked to call it, non-duality, God. I think that this is definitely the wrong approach. Why? I can tell you my story, which will display how this agenda of killing the ego is basically another operating system of self-harm. So in my case, I had beautiful starting experiences with the spirituality realm. I started meditating and I had huge benefits out of it. I went to yoga classes and I learned about all the big spiritual teachers. I read all the books and I felt so connected, because in my law studies and in my life before, I was very focused on achieving. I was very diligent. I was very good in school. I was also very good in law school, but I somehow felt unhappy. I felt that there was something inside of me that was longing for peace, inner peace. So I loved it when I got to know it. And you have to think about that time. I mean, I'm also not like, I'm not one survivor of the 60s, right? But I remember 7 years ago when I went to yoga classes. I mean, nowadays it's normal. Everybody does it, and it's very accepted in society. But 7 years ago when I started doing it, I was I was a weirdo. Like, all of my friends were so irritated, and yeah, but I did it anyways because it had so much benefit for my life. And then I came across the notion of the ego, and I heard so many people talking about somehow spiritual hierarchies. If you have a lot of light in your aura and you transcended all your past trauma or your karmic relationships, or you lived so many lives already. I mean, there's all this talk where people try to make a hierarchy, basically, who's more enlightened, who has more light, who has evolved further. So as the high achieving, high performer, diligent kid I was like, okay, let's go, let's transcend our ego, let's work really, really hard for it. And I even, back at that time, I even got that this time it's not about working harder, it's about letting go harder. It's not about putting in more work, it's about accepting more love in my life. I mean, you see, there is a very thin line of where do we actually come into peace, where do we actually allow more love in our lives, and where can our old patterns kind of hijack that agenda of losing the ego. So I was very focused on my new target, being enlightened. So I worked really hard for it. I think at one point I was really evolved for my age and for my surroundings concerning like where I lived and what the people did. I surrounded myself. I felt like an alien because I could see like in people's behaviors, their triggers, their patterns, their family patterns. Like it was so clear to me, and I think I was a very horrible person because I was telling everyone like, you do this because of this, because it was so clear to me, and I thought that I was helping them, telling them without being asked what I think their like childhood trauma is and how it displays in day-to-day life. Fast forward to today, I would say I'm very different now. I think I'm much more grounded in my human body experience, because at one point I experienced some kind of losing touch to reality and not being grounded in myself. And I was neglecting every human part of myself. For example, if I would feel envious or jealous of somebody else, I would look at that envy and be like, this is something I need to transform, because at the end, this is a nice thing to think. I was like trying to convince myself, okay, if we are all one, which means you are me, that means if you are having something that I want, I can be happy for you because you are me. So if you have it, I can also be happy already because we are the same person. And on the other hand, of course, I was like, okay, but if this is some just a way of life telling me that I want to have this in my life as well, then I can work for that and manifest it in my life. I mean, that's all great. But at the same time, I was always trying to overcome my humanity. I want to push it away. I wanted to cut it out. I wanted it to leave. Not that the thoughts that I just shared with you about envy are necessarily wrong, but it's the kind of question that was laying underneath all those ego overcoming strategies. Another example. If I would feel scared out of something, because there was a time where I played the game, if you're scared, you need to do it, with myself, because I was kind of anxious. So I did kind of a self-created confrontation therapy. But that led me to doing actually very dangerous things. I was not aware that, because everybody was saying like there is love and the counterpart to love is fear. So fear is not real because in the essence we are all one, and there is no actual reason to be scared of anything. So you should always choose love instead of fear. Yes, well, but sometimes there are real life situations where you feel fear, and that's freaking good, because this is dangerous and you should not do it. I don't want to go into detail because that's very personal, but I did a lot of things that I wish, I did some things where I wish I did not do them, where I wish that I listened to my fear. And there are many more situations where I didn't do it, didn't do the thing I was afraid of, and I'm so grateful I did not do it. But that time, I was blaming myself. I was putting myself down because I had this dogma in my head. Oh, you listened to the fear. You did not act enlightened, right? So basically, this is me telling you that sometimes when you have a feeling of like, that makes no sense, when some spiritual teachers talk to you, especially if you feel like, I don't have like experience of that statement being true, and I have an unwell feeling about it, that sometimes you can trust it. I mean, I know I have a big but. It's difficult because sometimes we have resistance towards statements because we are neglecting them, because we are somehow protecting some hurt part in ourselves. And sometimes we need to listen and to do the things we don't want to do, we feel restrained of doing. But at the same time, sometimes people tell you shit, literal shit, and especially in the spiritual community, and you tend to believe them because you think, oh, they're more enlightened, they've done so much more work in that field, so I need to trust them even though it doesn't feel right. So it's a really thin line here again. That's difficult, right? But it's life, because it can be either this or the other one. So to conclude the story that I started telling in the beginning, I realized that my objection of always shooting for the stars, in the sense of always trying to transcend the shit out of my ego, I really hurt myself, and I really hurt my progress. Because yes, as I said, there are parts of the ego, and these are the parts, when we would open the chapter of human design, that I would call the conditioning, the conditioned part. So for example, if your parents only loved you when you did XYZ, that character trait of yours where you do XYZ, that's some conditioning you experienced, and I would say this is some part of your ego, your personality, that you are free to let go, because it's not something that you necessarily need, because hopefully you're an adult, you can love yourself, you're not dependent on your parents anymore, so you can let go of that topic. At the same time, and that's exactly the same two-sided situation, you will have parts in yourself that are just the way they are, and they are part of your human experience, and nothing, no meditation, no retreat, no fucking psychedelic experience will be able to transform or transcend that part of yourself. It's like there are, for example, there's your hand, and my hand, your hand, our hands are recreating themselves all the time. It's part of myself, it's my hand. So if I want to transcend myself as a human being, my ego, what I often see in spirituality, people want to just cut the hand off to be more part of the whole self, the whole being, non-duality, God, whatever. What I say is, cut out the bullshit. If somebody, that's my all-time favorite comparison, conditioning, like what I told you just before, where your parents only loved you one way, is like mud that sticks to your body. For example, imagine me having like a big piece of mud over here. This is like, that's what I do extra, because I learned if I have this mud here, if I do XYZ, then I'll be loved from my parents. This is a part which is necessary to cut off to be able to dance freely. And this differentiation of like, what is my hand, what is part of my ego, of myself, that is just an innate, natural, beautiful part that I need to proceed to have, and what is mud. But I think in in the like general spiritual community, people don't differentiate there. They just try to overcome the basic human being, the ego, to transcend somewhere. I mean, you can do it if you like, but I experience that as secret and hidden self-harm. It's cutting my hand off in the wish and the hope of coming closer to God. But if you think God created us, they created us the way we are. And we should not disrespect creation and us being part of creation as well by trying to cut us off. And in my case, especially, as I told you, always a very diligent student, a very diligent kid, back in the day, I used my inner critic. I call him the inner marshal, who always was like, you have no needs, you can learn and study more, you are not hungry, study more. That part of myself that pushed me to that high scores, high results, that part hijacked the whole ego transcendent idea, and I was neglecting all of my needs, all of my human needs, of my natural needs of being. And I was like those monks. I was trying to diminish and destroy every like worldly need, everything, and especially as a woman, especially as somebody who is deeply connected to Earth and actually loves being here on planet Earth. It was horrible, and always for the sake of enlightenment. So from my heart, I can truly recommend coming back to yourself, to your human self. And of course, learn to see the mud, let it go, but keep your hand, please. You're beautiful and enlightened enough with your hand.